Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of Disney Plus, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We're talking episode 5, which was titled The World is Watching. And yes, it is. This episode had so much going for it. I'm so excited to break it all down in the spoiler discussion. But before we dive into it, make sure you all are following me on all my other social media accounts, which you can find those links in the description below. If you are new to the channel, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. It would mean a lot to me if you all can like and share this review. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate all the support. And in the comments below, let's talk about this episode. We see the transformation from John Walker to Captain America to becoming the U.S. agent as his counterpart in the comics. We get an incredible Dora Milaje moment. We get a death in this episode. Karli and the Flag Smashers, I'm finally getting on board with them. As you know from my previous episodes, I haven't really been that attached to the Flag Smashers, but we get a lot of great stuff in this episode, and I want to know what you all thought about it, your pros, your cons, and of course, your thoughts and theories for what's been said to be a big 5th episode coming next week. So let me know your theories on that in the comments. So look, as I always do with these recaps, I'd like to remind you all that we do have a live discussion every single Saturday, 3 p.m. Central Time. Myself, my amazing co-hosts, Amanda and Chris, and we will be having a special guest tomorrow, and that special guest will be returning, and that is Zach Pope. He will be joining the conversation, talking about this latest episode of The Falcon and Winter Soldier, as well as we got a low-key trailer we'll be discussing and dissecting and some other MCU news. So definitely tune in tomorrow, 3 p.m. Central Time on this channel to talk about this episode and some other MCU news tomorrow. It's going to be a fun time. See you all there. So let's get into this breakdown, this recap. This episode here, man, was really strong in my opinion. It was a solid episode. This entire series has been just really phenomenal writing, character development, giving us more appreciation for the Shield, for Sam, for Bucky, for Zemo, just kind of really building this rich world that the MCU has done so far, especially in the Captain America franchise. And this episode had a lot going for it, man. Seeing that transformation for John Walker, paralleling to how Sam would have taken the serum, of not taking the serum, seeing the legacy of the Shield now being somewhat demolished in a sense with the blood being on the Shield after the actions of John Walker. And also, like I mentioned a little bit briefly there, Karli Morgenthau and the Flag Smashers, again, I wasn't a big fan of them. I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan of them now, but I really like the scenes of seeing Karli and Sam and seeing her go against someone or having a scene with someone that can kind of match her energy that she's been given. And I really haven't felt the energy from her counterparts in her group, but seeing that moment with Sam and the conversation she has with Sarah being really threatening, I enjoyed this episode a lot. But again, let me know what you all thought about it. But with that being said, let's break it down. Let's recap it all as the episode opens up in Wakanda 6 years later. Whenever I hear that Wakandan music, I just get chills down my spine. R.I.P. to the King, Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa. But nonetheless, we see this flashback scene as we see Ayo talking to Bucky as he's going through real therapy sessions, as the therapist that he had in this show really wasn't cracking and working for him. This is Ayo really giving it her all and really breaking the Winter Soldier down in regards to the cold word she gives him. As we see Sebastian Stan in this moment, phenomenal acting, a phenomenal moment, a great flashback, a little more backstory, more development for Bucky as he's breaking out of his old mold as the Winter Soldier, as she tells him, you are now free from the Winter Soldier, which was a fantastic moment for Bucky and a fantastic moment for Sebastian Stan. He's been slaying this role in the MCU, but in the show just adds more layers to that character who I love and adore. But we cut back to the present day, which I love that they kind of didn't leave last week's cliffhanger on just kind of like sitting on our hands, like what's going to happen next. They pick up immediately, and again, we go to the moment. Ayo tells him, I'm going to give you 8 hours. And I love that respect that they have for you now. There doesn't have to be romantic or anything of that nature. It's just that bondship and that kind of what she was able to do to help Bucky. He has respect for her, so he knows when she says 8 hours, she means that. And we'll talk about the Dora Milaje making up that time. But nonetheless, we see Bucky informing Sam and Zemo that the Dora Milaje, they're here, they're on the way, we're on a time crunch. And then they also learn about the doings of Karli Morgenthau and the Flag Smashers of last week's events. her killing those men. I believe they said it was a total of 3 men that lost their lives. And this is where Zemo reminds Bucky and Sam that when you're on this path of having the serum in your blood, it can only lead to destruction. They kill you or you kill them. And Sam reminds Zemo, well, that wasn't the case with Steve. He says, touche, but there's not another Steve right now, is there? Which I thought was a great way, again, to tie it into John Walker's story in this episode. Because, again, as we remember, one of my favorite, I love Captain America trilogy, but just going back to the first Captain America when the doctor told Cap what the serum could do to you. And they say that so much so in this episode that it brings out the real person in you. And we see who John Walker really is in this episode. But cut to the Flag Smashers. Like I said, I've been pretty down on the Flag Smashers this entire episode, or this season, I should say. And not saying that I'm a full 180 and I love them and I fully, can understand where they're coming from. But it's more so Karli Morgenthau. Now, in the comments, again, it's Karl Morgenthau. It's one person that has a group of Flag Smashers, that has a group that follows him, very similar to this show. I'm not necessarily on board with the other members of the group because honestly, the show hasn't given us anything except for having these dialogues with Karli, and none of them really have reciprocated in regards to what she's giving. I'm not feeling the actors are giving her the same energy, but nonetheless, I like Karli Morgenthau and her interactions, her dialogue, her acting has been great. Aaron has been incredible in the show, but I really set well with the character in this episode as we see them learning the aftermaths of what they did last week, learning that the men had families, and we also learn that the GRC, they're starting up this Patch Act, which is essentially going to go back to normalcy and getting things back on fast track, which obviously the Flag Smashers don't want that, but we'll get back to them a little bit later. But again, I enjoyed a lot of what we got with Karli in this episode. But cutting to Zemo working his magic, which, by the way, if you all haven't seen already, they released the Zemo cut of him dancing in the club, which is fantastic. But we see him working his magic. He has his delights, his candy that he gives to the children as he's trying to get information in regards to Danya's funeral, and he gets the location. He doesn't initially share that with Sam and Bucky because he wants to use that as leverage, which we'll talk about here in a bit. But we see Sam giving a call to Sharon, and I got to just say it now, man. The idea of Sharon being the power broker, I know that theory's been out there. I don't think, and I said it I did a TikTok video on this theory video, who I think the power broker may be, which I mentioned in my review last week. But there's something going on with Sharon, man. She has a lot of power. If you guys notice in this episode, she had goons to her disposal. She has a satellite to her disposal. The resources she has at the palm of her fingers, man, is really interesting to see Agent 13 and what she has up her sleeve. But she lets Sam know on the phone that the power broker isn't happy about Dr. Nigel and obviously the serum being out of his possession. And he's shaking things up in Madripoor. So again, next week, power broker. Who is the power broker? Will that be revealed in this episode, or to say in next week's or the finale? Only time will tell. But cut back to Karli as she's talking to one of the Flag Smashers. She has the rest of the serum. They're at, the gentleman's, I believe that was his grandfather's grave that they were at. But the disrespect that gentleman had on Captain America's name, comparing Captain America, Steve Rogers, and Karli Morgenthau. Now, the blasphemy that came out of his mouth was insane, but there's a little bit of truth in what he's saying. In his eyes, he views her as a Captain America. He views her as what people can see themselves in Karli, the mission that they're on, being forgotten about, the GRC, replacing these people. So again, what he said was absolutely crazy, but I know where the character's coming from. As she mentions, the legacy outlives the shield, which that shield is definitely has some history to it after this episode, and a very different history than what Steve Rogers had. But speaking of Steve Rogers, cutting to John Walker and Battlestar. As we catch up with them, they have finally caught up to our crew. They see that Zemo and Bucky and Sam are on the same page, and Sam's wants to have a moment alone with Karli. Battlestar Lamar convinces John to let him have this moment, but John lets Sam know, I'm going to only give you 10 minutes. There's a lot of timelines in this episode with, Ayo with 8 hours, John Walker with 10 minutes. So everyone's on a time crunch in this episode, which really kind of sets the stakes and lets you know that there's some stakes at hand. Cutting back to Karli at the funeral. She has some, again, Erin Kellyman and her as, Karli Morgenthau in this episode was fantastic. The final words she gives to Danya and reminding people again the strong words of one world, one people. Cutting to John Walker being very impatient. He's very impatient in this episode, and we'll get more into John a little bit later. But we see Sam getting that one-on-one moment, and this is again what I mentioned a little bit early. All the Karli Morgenthau stuff prior to this episode, her having the dialogue with her other Flag Smasher companion, it just wasn't working for me. She was doing great, but the other actors weren't giving me, what I was wanting in that scene. But having her go against Sam and having this back-to-back, not fist fight, but this dialogue fight, and just the ideologies that they share, and even Sam admits in this scene, I understand what you're fighting for. It's just the means that you're going about doing this. Killing people isn't something I'm about. So seeing them go back and forth, that conversation was really incredible in my opinion. Some really strong dialogue as far as the writing department goes. But unfortunately, that conversation is broken up to the fact that John Walker's just burst in there, taking control. And at that point, we see that Karli's kind of broken her bond with Sam at that moment because she feels as though he's working with Captain America. As we see, Bucky is chasing Karli at this point. Zemo kind of makes his way into this corridor that they're at. He runs into Karli, finds her, shoots her. I'm thinking at this point, oh, Karli's dead. She's a deader. But no, John Walker, yet again, comes into the mix, knocks out Zemo. Say actually before that, rewinding, as Zemo shoots her, he crushes the majority of all of the super soldier serum except for one. As he's knocked out by John Walker, Karli makes her way out of the room. John Walker picks up that vial, and we see what he does with that a little bit later. But cutting back to Zemo asking, would you take the serum, Sam? And immediately Sam says no, which is something to keep in mind because someone else gets asked that question a little bit later. But we see that Bucky, his time is up. John Walker comes into their room. They're having this. John Walker, challenges Sam to a one-on-one fight, which I would have loved to have seen that scene. I would love to know. Let me know in the comments. No super serum involved, no shields involved, no wings involved. Who wins a fight? Sam Wilson or John Walker? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But nonetheless, this fight is broken up, or this almost fight is broken up because the 8 hours is up. Bucky and the Dora Milaje and Ayo are in the building, and this is an incredible moment here. Again, guys, the Dora Milaje is so awesome. Ayo is an incredible actor. The actress that plays her and that character is just so awesome. And seeing the Dora Milaje in action, taking out Battlestar, taking out John Walker, using their weapons to their disposal, as Sam and Bucky and Zemo are all, they're watching this. They're on the sidelines, and I love the banter between the two. Should we do something as they're watching? Like I said, John Walker and Battlestar getting their ass handed to him. We see Zemo sneaking his way into the sewers as he makes his escape because they were there for him, the Dora Milaje. But we see in this moment as Bucky, he finally kind of steps in because he sees this is not a fair fight, right? We see Ayo disables his arm, which was a really cool moment. Just kind of, again, shows you, hey, Bucky, we gave you that arm. We could take it away from you as far as Wakanda goes. But it's important to note that John Walker feels defeated in this moment. He tells Battlestar Lamar they weren't even super soldiers. But, hey, to be fair, John Walker, it's the Dora Milaje. They can handle their own nonetheless, but it's important to note that, again, he feels defeated in this moment. Cut to seeing John Walker in Battlestar. He signs an autograph of a civilian. They have the conversation, and John asks Lamar, hey, if you had the opportunity to take the serum, would you? And he says yes, which is interesting to tie that into his counterpart in the comic books, which obviously by the end of this episode, it doesn't play out in the same way it does in the comics. But he says, yes, I would take the serum. As he gets that, John gets to hear that yes, and gives him a little bit more motivations of taking that serum, which he does later in this episode. But it's also important to note that Lamar does tell him, again, going back to the first Captain America, the first Avenger, when the doctor tells Steve, once you take that serum, yeah, it gives you super abilities, but it brings out the inner you, the real human, the real hero or potentially villain that lies inside of you. So we cut back to seeing Karli calling Sarah, threatening her, which I'm like, Karli, you need to calm down. It was a good kind of moment for her because, again, she has her moment saying, I want to meet with Sam, but hey, if you pull any, foolery, I know where you live. And that was a really, okay, Karli, I see what you're doing there, threatening Sam's family. But nonetheless, we see that she does invite Sam. They have their conversation. She wants him to join the cause, which Sam isn't about that. But it's just interesting to see that she wants him on her side. Sharon warns Sam that John Walker, yet again, is making his way into it. Again, this shows you She has a satellite to her disposal. What is Sharon Carter into in regards to the resources? Is this provided by the power broker? Cut to seeing John Walker and Battlestar getting taken by the Flag Smashers. Obviously, John is like, this is my best friend. I need to find out where he is. As they're looking for him, they get tangled into this fight. We see John Walker in the hallway. He has a serum, ladies and gentlemen. It's in his veins. He is now a super soldier because he's taking out this Flag Smasher, throwing the shield, is sticking it to the wall. He's breaking pipes. He is now John Walker, Captain America, becoming the U.S. agent. He has a serum in his veins. Cut to this really kind of cool hand-to-hand combat, kind of Jason Bourne tight quarters fight between John Walker. We have Bucky, we have Sam, we have Karli, we have the other Flag Smashers. Really good choreography within the scene. We wrap up the episode as Karli is going to kill John Walker with their knife. See, Battlestar steps in to save his best friend. Unfortunately, he gets the KO punch to his chest, goes into a wall. Battlestar is dead, and John Walker sees this in action. This just goes back to that moment. We don't spend that much time with Lamar. The show just tells you that they're really close friends. I would have loved to have seen that scene that Lamar was referring to early in the episode with them being in Iraq. But you know what that means for John Walker to see him die in that moment, feeling vulnerable that even though he has a super serum, he wasn't able to save his friend. So that sits on him as he sees the death of his best friend. As we wrap up the episode, at this point, Sam, Bucky, Karli's, kind of escaped at this point. We see John Walker chasing down. He doesn't care who it is. He sees that it is a particular Flag Smasher. The Flag Smasher says it wasn't me. He doesn't want to hear that. We see John take that shield that has the Cap America, the Steve Rogers legacy behind it, smash in this man's chest to the point that he's dead. The world is watching as this is titled. We see that there's blood on the shield, blood on his face. Karli sees this. Sam and Bucky sees this. But like I said, the world sees Captain America kill this person. End of the episode. So let's get into it. As this episode ends, there's two things that's going to happen with John Walker. Number one, he's going to be dismantled as Captain America. The shield's no longer his. The government, I don't think they're going to put him in jail or anything because that was obviously in a moment of combat. And obviously they're terrorists and whatnot, so I don't think they'll throw him in jail. But they can take away the shield and the mantle and Captain America. John Walker is no longer Captain America. Or the second option, which I think will end up being true, we got to remember, the world's watching. This show is kind of touching on social commentary regarding even when people have their cell phones and you can see them doing something bad. Sometimes the government makes it seem like it was just, it is what it was, and they're going to protect their people. And we'll see what happens with the government with John Walker because they might just say, he was right to do what he did. He was in the battle, in the moment of battle, as we see sometimes with the police force in the U.S. and things that have shaken down for many, many years, but in particular in the last year or so. So it doesn't matter if you have a camera or not. As long as that shield and that those colors protect you, you're going to be on the good side. So I can see the government covering for John Walker before he ultimately does something that they just have to take the shield. But I don't think that shield's going to be taken away from him just because he killed a terrorist that is a Flag Smasher. So we'll see what happens. Let me know what you all think will happen to John Walker. Of course, let's talk about next week's, the 5th episode, the second to last episode. That's supposed to have this big cameo again. Not get into WandaVision territory with Paul Bettany's reference to this big actor, Luke Skywalker moment, but I think that we will get a big character. It might not necessarily be the reveal, the power broker. It may be someone from Wakanda, Shiri, Okoye, someone of that stature, someone entirely new. Again, we got Madripoor. There's some X-Men vibes. Is there an X-Men character cameo in the mix? Is the character we've seen before? Is there a new character? We'll talk about it more in the live stream, but let me know your theories of what you think that character may be, that big reveal next week. And of course, let me know your pros, your cons, the things you enjoyed about this episode, as well as things that you might not have enjoyed about this episode. But again, we'll be diving deeper into this episode tomorrow, 3 p.m. Central Time. Myself, Amanda, Chris, Zach Pope. We'll be breaking it down, talking about the Loki trailer and having a great discussion with you all live. Make sure to like the video, share the video. Again, leave your thoughts in the comments about this episode and your theories for next week. Hope you enjoyed this review. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you in the next video.